Barbara is introduced as a quiet, emotionally burdened young woman whose life has been shaped by loss and responsibility. She works as a tailor, the same profession her mother dedicated her life to, and this shared craft is the strongest remaining connection between them. The story opens with Barbara lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling where threads hang down with photographs of her and her mother attached to them. These photographs are not simple decorations but preserved memories, carefully arranged as if she is trying to hold on to moments that no longer exist. When she pulls the threads, recorded conversations with her mother from her final days begin to play, revealing how deeply Barbara is still living in the past. Her grief is not loud or dramatic. It is silent, constant, and woven into her everyday routine. After her mother's death, Barbara is left alone with a small tailoring shop that her mother once ran successfully. This shop is not just a workplace but her last emotional and financial lifeline. It represents her mother's legacy, her own identity, and her only source of income. However, Barbara struggles to live up to her mother's reputation. Clients who once admired her mother constantly compare the two, reminding Barbara of her perceived inadequacy. Every stitch she sews carries the weight of expectation, and every mistake feels like a personal failure rather than a simple human error. The pressure slowly chips away at her confidence and fuels her inner frustration. Barbara's daily life follows a repetitive and exhausting pattern. She lives above the shop, wakes up surrounded by reminders of her mother, and goes downstairs to work in a space filled with both memories and judgment. Financial stress looms over her constantly, as the shop barely earns enough to survive. Each client becomes a test of her worth, not just as a tailor but as a daughter trying to honor her mother's name. When an older client praises her mother while criticizing Barbara's work, it deepens her emotional wounds. The criticism is not merely about tailoring skills. It feels like a rejection of Barbara herself. This emotional pressure builds quietly within her. Barbara does not express her anger openly, but it manifests in small moments of frustration and hesitation. She wants to be strong, responsible, and patient. Yet her unresolved grief makes it difficult to control her emotions. Her attachment to the shop shows how desperately she wants stability in a life that feels like it is slipping out of her control. The shop is her bread and butter, but it is also a constant reminder of what she has lost and what she fears she can never become. By establishing Barbara's fragile emotional state, the story makes it clear that she is not driven by greed or malice but by exhaustion, grief, and survival. Her inner conflict sets the foundation for every decision she imagines later in the story. Barbara's struggle is deeply human, rooted in loss, responsibility, and the quiet fear of failing the person she loved the most. As Barbara steps away from her shop to buy a replacement button for her client's dress, the ordinary rhythm of her day is suddenly disrupted by an unexpected and disturbing sight. On the road ahead, two motorcyclists lie injured after a violent crash, their bodies scattered on opposite sides of the street. The scene is chaotic and unsettling, far removed from Barbara's quiet world of fabric, needles, and routine. Near the accident, she notices a white powder spilled across the ground and a briefcase lying nearby, immediately signaling that this is not a simple road mishap but something far more dangerous. In that moment, Barbara becomes an unwilling witness to the aftermath of a criminal deal gone wrong. Standing there alone, Barbara is overwhelmed by fear and uncertainty. The injured men are clearly involved in something illegal, and the presence of weapons confirms the seriousness of the situation. Her first instinct is driven by responsibility and morality. She reaches for her phone, preparing to call the police and report what she has seen. This reaction reflects the part of her that still believes in doing the right thing, the same part shaped by her mother's values and her own quiet nature. However, hesitation quickly follows. Her eyes return to the briefcase, and the weight of her financial struggles presses heavily on her mind. As she looks at the injured men, Barbara's thoughts spiral. The briefcase represents a possible escape from her ongoing hardships. The shop, her debts, and the constant struggle to survive flash through her mind. At the same time, fear grips her, because any wrong move could cost her freedom or even her life. A third option forms just as quickly. She could turn away and leave the scene entirely. pretending she never saw anything. That choice promises safety, but also guarantees that her life will remain unchanged. Trapped in the same cycle of struggle and quiet despair, these three choices collide inside Barbara's mind, creating intense internal conflict. Her morality tells her to help. Her fear urges her to run, and her desperation tempts her to act selfishly. The silence of the road amplifies her thoughts, and the injured man's vulnerability makes the situation even more disturbing. Barbara realizes that whatever decision she makes in this moment will permanently alter the course of her life. There is no neutral path forward, only consequences she cannot fully predict. In a sudden shift, driven by frustration, exhaustion, and suppressed anger, Barbara abandons the idea of calling the police. The years of comparison to her mother, financial pressure, and emotional isolation push her toward the darkest option. She convinces herself that this is her only chance to change her fate. Using the very tools that define her identity as a tailor, she carefully executes a plan that turns the injured men against each other. Her needle and thread, symbols of creation and repair, are transformed into instruments of manipulation and destruction. This moment marks a turning point in Barbara's character. The accident scene becomes the place where her inner struggle manifests into action. Her decision is not portrayed as a moment of triumph, but as a deeply troubling choice born from desperation. It reveals how fragile morality can become when survival feels uncertain, and how a single moment of weakness can lead a person down an irreversible path. After making her initial decision at the accident site, the story shifts into a complex psychological space where Barbara begins imagining the possible consequences of her actions. What unfolds is not a straightforward sequence of events, but a series of alternate realities playing out inside her mind. Each scenario represents a different path her life could take depending on the choice she makes, and each imagined outcome grows darker and more dangerous than the last. These mental projections are vivid and detailed, blurring the line between thought and reality, and forcing the audience to experience the weight of every potential decision alongside her. In one imagined outcome, Barbara follows through with taking the briefcase and becomes deeply entangled in the criminal world connected to it. What initially seems like a solution to her financial struggles quickly turns into a nightmare of violence, betrayal, and constant fear. She finds herself hunted by dangerous people who are determined to reclaim what they have lost. Every attempt she makes to outsmart them only pulls her further into chaos. Her tailoring shop, once a symbol of safety and familiarity, transforms into a trap where danger follows her through the door. The more she tries to control the situation, the more it spirals beyond her grasp. Another imagined path explores what happens when she attempts to involve the police after taking the briefcase. In this scenario, Barbara learns that honesty does not guarantee safety. Law enforcement becomes another source of threat rather than protection, and she is treated with suspicion and hostility. The missing briefcase turns her into a prime suspect, and her explanations are drowned out by evidence stacked against her. The criminals searching for the money close in, while the authorities fail to recognize the true danger she is in. This version of events shows how quickly a person can be crushed between two powerful forces, neither of which offers mercy. As these imagined realities unfold, death becomes a recurring outcome, no matter how cleverly Barbara plans or how cautiously she behaves. Each scenario leads toward tragedy. Friends, strangers, and even Barbara herself are killed in violent confrontations. These deaths are not portrayed as heroic or meaningful, but as senseless results of greed, fear, and misunderstanding. The repetition of fatal endings emphasizes the inevitability of destruction once she steps beyond a certain moral boundary. Every imagined path reinforces the idea that some choices cannot be undone, no matter how intelligent or resourceful a person may be. The shifting scenarios also reveal Barbara's growing self-awareness. As she visualizes these outcomes, she begins to understand the limitations of her control. Her imagination becomes a warning system, forcing her to confront the truth that courage and cleverness are not enough to survive a world ruled by crime and power. Each imagined failure strips away her initial confidence and replaces it with clarity. She sees that trying to outplay criminals and authorities alike only leads to isolation and death. by presenting these alternate outcomes as detailed mental projections. The story transforms into an exploration of consequence and accountability. The audience is invited into Barbara's inner conflict, experiencing her fear, regret, and realization in real time. These imagined paths do not simply serve as plot devices, but as reflections of her conscience and survival instinct. They ultimately push her toward a deeper understanding of herself and the fragile line between choice and fate. At the center of the criminal chaos that surrounds Barbara are Hudson and his son Joshua, two figures whose relationship defines much of the danger she becomes entangled in. Hudson is portrayed as a powerful and ruthless man, someone who commands fear and loyalty in equal measure. His presence carries an unspoken threat, and his reputation alone is enough to unsettle those around him. Joshua, on the other hand, stands in sharp contrast to his father. He is younger, conflicted, and visibly uncomfortable with the violent world he has been forced into. Together, they represent two sides of the same criminal structure: absolute control and reluctant obedience. Barbara's connection to Hudson and Joshua begins indirectly, through the accident and the briefcase, but quickly becomes personal. As she encounters Joshua, she realizes that he is not a hardened criminal, but a frightened individual caught in circumstances beyond his control. Joshua admits that he was pressured by his father to participate in a dangerous deal, despite lacking the experience or mindset needed for such a life. His fear and guilt are evident, revealing a young man who understands the moral cost of his actions but feels powerless to resist his father's authority. Hudson's influence over Joshua is rooted in domination rather than guidance. He views his son as an extension of himself, expecting loyalty without question and obedience without hesitation. Hudson's idea of family is deeply tied to control, and he believes that fear is the most effective way to maintain it. This dynamic creates constant tension, as Joshua struggles between wanting his father's approval and wanting to escape the violent path laid out for him. His hesitation during the deal is not an act of betrayal, but a moment of human weakness, one that Hudson interprets as unforgivable. Barbara becomes trapped between this broken father-son relationship, forced to navigate their conflict while trying to protect herself. She quickly understands that honesty or compliance alone will not guarantee her safety. Hudson's suspicion of her grows as he begins to see her not as an innocent bystander, but as a potential threat to his control. Joshua, meanwhile, sees Barbara as a rare source of empathy and understanding. Their brief interactions reveal a shared sense of fear and a desire to survive rather than dominate. Using her intelligence and the tools of her trade, Barbara relies on creativity rather than brute force. Needles, thread, fabric, and everyday objects become extensions of her mind, allowing her to create traps and distractions in moments of extreme pressure. These tools symbolize her refusal to become like Hudson. Instead of embracing violence directly, she manipulates the environment around her, turning ordinary items into means of defense. Her actions are calculated, not impulsive, driven by the need to stay alive rather than to gain power. The conflict between Hudson and Joshua ultimately exposes the emptiness of Hudson's authority. His obsession with control blinds him to his son's fear and desperation, pushing Joshua further away. Barbara's presence acts as a catalyst, bringing these hidden tensions to the surface. Through this interaction, the story highlights how power built on fear inevitably destroys personal bonds, leaving behind only suspicion, regret, and violence. After witnessing the imagined consequences of every possible decision, Barbara reaches a moment of emotional clarity that reshapes her understanding of survival. The repeated visions of violence, betrayal, and death strip away any illusion that money or cleverness alone can save her. She realizes that her greatest danger is not the criminals or the police, but the loss of control over her own emotions. Anger, frustration, and desperation have repeatedly led her toward outcomes where she either dies or destroys everything she is trying to protect. This realization becomes the turning point that allows her to choose a different path. When Barbara finally acts in the real moment, she does so with restraint rather than impulse. She controls her temper with her client, completes her work professionally, and leaves the shop without letting frustration guide her actions. Instead of returning to the scene of the accident or involving herself in the chaos she foresaw, she takes an alternate route, symbolically distancing herself from danger. This decision is small on the surface, yet it represents a profound shift in her character. She chooses stability over temptation and patience over rage, proving that survival does not always require dramatic action. Barbara's encounter with Hudson later reinforces the importance of her restraint. Rather than panicking or reacting emotionally, she remains calm and observant. Her ability to think clearly allows her to navigate the situation without provoking suspicion or violence. The money she receives is not taken through force or deceit, but handed to her as part of a misunderstanding that she does not attempt to exploit further. Unlike her imagined scenarios, this outcome does not demand bloodshed or betrayal, only silence and discretion. The money becomes meaningful not because of its amount, but because of what it represents. It is not a symbol of greed or escape, but a means to preserve the last connection she has to her mother. By saving the tailoring shop, Barbara safeguards her identity and the legacy her mother left behind. The shop transforms from a place of constant pressure into a space of survival and continuity. Her victory is quiet and deeply personal, achieved without violence or manipulation. This ending emphasizes that Barbara's true strength lies in self-control rather than dominance. She does not outsmart powerful criminals or bend the system to her will. Instead, she survives by recognizing her limits and refusing to cross a moral line that would have consumed her. The story closes on a note of fragile hope, suggesting that even in a world filled with danger and corruption, a single moment of clarity can change everything. Barbara's final choice does not erase her pain or struggles, but it allows her to live with them. She carries forward her grief, her memories, and her responsibility, choosing life over destruction. In doing so, she proves that survival is not always about winning, but about knowing when to walk away. If you enjoyed this story and its twist-filled ending, don't forget to like the video. Subscribe to the channel for more suspenseful stories like this. Here are more videos you love, check them out now. Thanks for watching.